Recording in progress.
Welcome back, everybody, to The Broken Brain. It's me, Dwight, here to host yet again a little trip down to the intersection of culture, psychology, and social issues that, in this case, and as in we always shoot for on this show, social issues that touch everybody. And whenever we're talking about the well-being and mental health of kids, we're talking about the mental health and well-being of everybody, because for one, we all know kids, and for second, they will replace us someday. That sounded darker than I meant it to, right? But it is true. They're going to be the ones that are not only growing up to be in charge, but we like it. We need them to be. So my guest today is no stranger to that. I'm joined today by Debbie Ausburn, who has really put in a whole career and a lifetime of helping children as a social worker, as a foster parent, as an attorney, and also now as the author of the book Raising Other People's Children, which goes into particularly the dynamics with foster and stepchildren and just the developmental needs and the things of that have to do with some complex situations. Debbie, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, let you take a more specific, informed pass at your career in history and tell everybody, kind of who you are and the work you do and what's led you to share these things in your book.
Okay. Well, I have career ADD, so I have tried lots of things. I grew up working. My parents had youth groups at church and church camps and that sort of thing. So I grew up in that venue and worked. When I got out of college, I worked for a while as a social worker with the juvenile court, and basically burned out and went to law school, but kept my passion for working with kids. So I have worked as I spent some time as a prosecutor of crimes against children. And then when I came back into private practice, I just gravitated towards advising youth organizations. And so that's been my professional niche, is advising youth organizations, defending them in court. And then now I'm gradually moving my practice more towards keeping them out of trouble. And then along the way, I worked as a foster parent in my, again, I worked with foster groups as a lawyer, but also because of my social work background, I just saw the need and wasn't married at the time, and worked as a foster parent, and then fell in love with a guy who had 5 kids. Only 2 of them were at home, so it's not quite as daunting as it sounds like. But
still a lot of people.
That's right. That's right. So, right. So I've never had biological kids, but I've collected 7 kids and 10 grandkids.
So there you go. Well, it's very interesting. I like the title is very grabby right away, where it goes into raising other people's children. It's a dynamic that is very important when you are in the place of being a guardian of any kind with children that are not your own children, right? And right. You see that all the way from people who deal with children in a professional way that is just basically their day shift. They already take an important role of leadership and mentorship. Well, they can, and right. Hopefully, right? So that already, you see what an important difference a good teacher or even a therapist or someone like myself or a social worker can make. And then you get into, but actually living with and co-parenting with all the other parental units involved with those kids, whether they're involved or not involved or whatever. Anyway, there's a whole bunch that's there. How, when you thought about this book, what kinds of dynamics were you thinking, like, here's what we need to get out there and talk about?
Well, I think the impetus was I saw so many people going into the situation with good intentions and high expectations, and not really understanding the effects of trauma on kids. And so I went in with the same rose-colored glasses. Maybe not quite so much because I'd been a social worker first, but I felt the need to explain to people. The first chapter of my book is titled "You're Not the Person Who's Supposed to Be There," and by that I mean, from the kid's perspective, we are not their biological family. They have this. It's almost a primal need, expectation of an intact biological family. And they will work very hard to have keep their family together and have a biological family. You don't have to go back to movies like The Parent Trap to see how strong that impetus is. And so, as a foster parent and actually a step parent, I'm not their parent. I'm not the person that they want to be there or expect to be there. I am what I call a Plan B parent, and that's perfectly fine. I can still have a great relationship with my kids in spite of that.
You see how it's interesting from a child's perspective if they are in either as being step parented or and this will be, I mean, obviously more so if they're in foster care, something's gone not according to plan.
Right.
And I think we can say that probably covers all those situations, most
it
likely,
does.
right? Of no matter how they happened. And
Right.
particularly one of the things that's difficult for children is that, generally speaking, and once again, this probably applies to everything too. The kids in particular are the people with the least power to determine that
Yes.
happened to them, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Even in cases where the outcome is the healthiest possible outcome, nobody gave them a vote, and they don't,
right.
Or they couldn't impact that situation even if they would like to, right?
Exactly. So, some adult or multiple adults somewhere made decisions that that completely impacted their lives. And the way I put it one time to one of my kids is I realized, this was an adult kid that I was saying this to, so someone had the capacity to process what I was saying. Is I realized at some point that my most valued and most important relationships in my life, my kids and my marriage, had come my way because someone had screwed up and had messed up, which was what could have been a pretty good thing for everybody. And so I'm comfortable with that. But for the kids, it's a tough process realizing that adults have made decisions that completely disrupt and upend their lives, and there is nothing they can do about it.
Mm-hmm. And so when you have adults going into that, I think you've already mentioned one thing, which is the need for acceptance, right? You accept that this is not an ideal situation, even if I have to accept that going into one that is very happy for me or for whoever, right? It's like making it hopefully is making a bad situation better. But do we almost also accept that, particularly from the point of view of the child, is not probably it's certainly not what they want. And who are you? Who's this guy or gal that's showed up? Right. Yeah,
exactly. One of the I have some online courses about this, and I actually have an ebook. And one of the things I talk about is, we're a storytelling animals. We tell stories to ourselves, and kids have their narrative of their lives, and we're dropped into their story. And every story has a hero who, in the kids' story, they are the hero of their story. It's not us as much as we'd like it to be. And every story has a villain and who's trying to keep the hero from getting to their goal. And then every story has a mentor who helps the hero get there. There are only two places for us in that story. We can be either the villain or we can be the mentor.
Hmm.
And it is very, very easy to slide ourselves into the villain slot because we think, for example, as adults, we think that biological parents are the villains because they're the ones who screwed up. But, in the kids telling of the story, the parent is the goal. They are never the villain. Well, maybe 2% of the time they're the villain, but
Well, but from the perspective of a child,
of the kid, yes,
you see it all throughout life where parents cast a long shadow, even parents
yes,
who aren't there. It's one role where you cannot be present and still have a shadow, right, that
yes,
impacts someone's life. Yeah. And even
yeah,
when there
yeah,
are villainous
exactly.
behaviors and even first of all the nuance of who's a villain, who's a whatever, what percentage are we? Kids are just going to look at it and say, as you put it, the metric is different. It's like, are you my
Yes,
mom? Are you my dad? Well, then already you're not. So,
right,
and
right,
they would
right.
like it to work. The interesting thing I always thought is that children, and once again, there's more complications and nuance in the world, but children are essentially trying to do the thing they've always been told to do, which is someone did a thing, they say they're sorry. Okay, great. We try to accept it. And certainly there's deeper aspects to trauma and abandonment and neglect and difficulties and all that, but they're like, okay, let's just make it okay. Let's just make it fine, right? And can't we all
Right,
just go back to or go better than or whatever it is, right?
right, right. Exactly. Say I'm sorry and go back and I get my family back. and
Right.
and and it gets very complicated with kids wanting their family back and sometimes we are the only adult who's available for them to be angry at and like every story has a villain and it's very easy for us to put ourselves there inadvertently and then sometimes we end up there in spite of everything we can do
Yes.
and that's just a risk that you're going to have to take, you know? Um, so just, every story, when kids tell themselves the story, there is someone stopping them from wherever they want to be. And sometimes because we're the ones who are present, providing structure, giving them rules, particularly with teenagers, we become the barrier, the reason they can't be happy. And there's some things we can do about that, but sometimes even everything we do is not enough, and we just have to learn to accept that. And I call it, sort of, we have to learn how to be like gravity, in the sense that gravity is always there; it doesn't really care what you think about it. Now, it's not very nurturing, so the analogy is not perfect, but we have to be a nurturing version of gravity that, the kids can bounce off us, whatever they want to be, they can be, but whenever they want to come back, we are there.
That's such a great point. I spent years working in youth residential care, which is another weird experience with other
Oh,
people's
yeah.
kids that it deserves its own. We've done shows about that too, but that its own sort of let's say pros and cons. Anyway, we won't get into that now. I'm just saying that one of the biggest struggles we had in training new people, especially if they were brand new to that role and that either corner of the field or working in mental health at all, was that they came in with certain expectations of how the interaction would probably go. And for example, one of the ones I saw was most destructive was they expected gratitude. They'd come in and be like, I'm
Ah,
going to be this great person in this kid's life.
yes.
I'm out of my
Yes.
way. I don't even have to be here. And I'm going to do all this. And they're going to be like, oh, let's have this bond. And that's not, especially with in the foster system, which all the kids I worked with were I worked with state
Yes.
residential treatment,
Yes. Yes.
the better kind. Anyway, no, but there were kids are have been through so many experiences, and because of all you said, it's like no, they're gonna find ways to find out if you're really a safe person, and it's not necessarily going
Right.
to be, hey, are you a safe person? Okay, I believe you.
Right, right. No, they do it by pushing boundaries. They push you away, and if you're still there, then that's how they test you. And I don't, adults. I understand as adults, gratitude is nice sometimes, but realistically, we don't get gratitude from our biological kids. So
Right. Yeah.
how do we expect traumatized kids to have the capacity to be grateful? And besides which, gratitude is such a rich diet. Nobody wants to be a charity case.
Hmm. Right.
so um yeah, we just have to go into it not expecting gratitude. I mean, to the extent that I always appreciated and counted a plus when my kids remember me on Mother's Day. I'm not their mother. It's
Hmm.
perfectly fine with me to not be remembered on Mother's Day. I appreciate it when I get it and when they do think of me. And every once in a while, I'll joke and say, "Tell your brothers you won Mother's Day today." Um, but
Sure.
but but it is not an expectation because, like I said, I'm not their mother. I'm more of a mentor. so we just have to give up that expectation in order to have any sort of relationship. I mean, if the kids are just meeting our expectations by being grateful, then it really has no value on either side.
Hmm. Well, and in some cases, even when they demonstrate grateful behavior, we, not to over pathologize both directions, but it's good to be cautious as well to say, do they feel like they can be open with me? And if they
Right,
have deeper needs, right? So it's kind of a
right, right.
balancing act there to say, are they just, well, I'm playing a role because that's maybe how I cope. And I'm not, really, no one knows that they need to help me. Or am I, lashing out because that's how I cope? I lash outward or inward, and
Yes,
that's how I cope. And so getting to know them, it sounds like there's a thread running through this, which is allowing them and allowing the relationship to be what it is first. Like there's an
yes.
heavy acceptance piece you're describing.
Yes, it has to grow organically, and whatever they give you is what you accept and say, fine, this is what we have. And it sometimes it is kind of difficult. It's always terrible being the only adult in the room, and it really is hard sometimes being the one who is setting the boundaries and say, no, I have to keep you safe. So this is what we have to do. And no, you can't stay out till midnight when you're 14. Um, those kind of rules, and and then whatever they give us in reaction to that, we just have to say, fine, that's what we have.
Mm-hmm.
And accept it when they um, take that one step forward, and then accept it when we get the two steps back. So,
Um, what other do you see other expectations that people carry in that sort of mess things up when things don't go according to what the adult thinks they should?
yeah, I think as sometimes as adults, we think that raising kids and dealing with traumatized kids is sort of like fine tuning an engine or doing a recipe. You add 3 cups of patience and 2 parts of knowledge and a teaspoon of love and compassion, and you bake it for 6 weeks, and then you have a great relationship. It doesn't work that way because kids have agency. They make decisions, and you have to give them space to make those decisions. And I think sometimes there's 2 things we do. One thing is we reject them too soon. We say, "Oh, this is the best I'm ever going to get," and that's not much of a relationship. And again, we have to be the adult, and as much as hard as that is, we have to find the resources from other places and other strong relationships and adult relationships to where we can keep giving to these kids. I mean, it's a one-way commitment that we're making. But on the other hand, we have to protect that commitment with boundaries. So it's unconditional love, but it's not an unconditional commitment. And I think sometimes we feel so sorry for these kids that we just make excuses for them. And trauma is an explanation, it is not an excuse. they can overcome it. They can move forward. As when I was first starting out, one very experienced foster parent told me, and I remembered it. I didn't understand it for several years, but she said, sometimes what you have to say to the kids is, I'm so sorry you went through this. And now it's time to do the dishes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting balance because, you can see the error on both sides of saying like, no, I'm the one who's going to get in and get them straightened and they're going to be all the
Yes.
things and whatever. And you really shouldn't shoot to be that household. And then on the other hand, there's what you're mentioning, which is kind of like, well, I'm just going to be completely hands off. And particularly if there, there's a balance of it, they do have, either whether it's foster care or especially if we have a partner who is their biological parent. And
Oh, yeah.
there's some of, I think, both of those, if we look at those as extremes and try to pull into the middle, there is some of both of that and a little bit of a dance
Yes.
or a balance. I should defer sometimes. I should say, I'm not going to like burn the world down about getting the dishes done tonight. But on the other hand, we need to do the dishes still. So, what kind of feedback do you
Well,
have for people about finding that balance?
I love what I call the doctrine of logical consequences. So it is that if it's somebody's job to do the dishes and they don't do the dishes, then a lot of us will do the dishes for them, get upset, fuss and fume. But kids can live with being fussed at, and at the end of the day, they didn't have to do the dishes. So it is much better to let them figure it out themselves. I remember one foster kid I had who just never did the dishes, and I let him get stacked up until finally I said, I'm sorry, I can't cook dinner. There's nothing to cook dinner in. And she looked over, she said, I can't do that big pile of dishes. And I said, well, somebody's going to have to. And she was, well, can we order in? No, not unless you've got money. I've got no money for takeout. So I don't know. I got no solutions. I guess there's peanut butter and jelly. And she finally ended up with no choice but to dig in and figure out how to do the piled up dishes that she had left piled up. It was her job and it was her problem to figure it out. So kids who don't take out the trash, I know this is an old one, but it's so effective. When they don't take the trash out and the trash is piling up in the kitchen, I get it out of the kitchen by putting it in their room, and it sits in their room until they figure out when to take it.
Take this out. I see. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's out of my way. I've gotten what I want out of it, which is I don't have to deal with it, but it is still their job. I don't take it out. I put it in their space. I love putting trash in kids' rooms because it's got to go out sometime. I talk in my book about co-parenting with a beagle. I had a child who I usually let kids do whatever they want to in their rooms. It's their safe space, and everybody needs a safe space with no adults. However, they do have to not get food in the room because it draws all sorts of critters. And I had a child who never got the food out of the room like they were supposed to. But I did have my secret weapon there was the child didn't like the dog in their room. But I said, look, if the beagle thinks you have food in your room, I am not going to second guess a beagle. And if you don't want small furry mammals roaming around your room, then you need to make sure there's no food in the room. and then there was this, look, I know there's no food in the room because I've cleaned it all out. And I said, well, yes, but you trained the beagle that there would be food in the room. So it's going to be a couple of weeks before the beagle figures it out. There are consequences to decisions that go past the fact that you have fixed the problem. And that's just the way the world works. And so I'm a big fan of letting them deal with it. I keep my fingerprints off of it. I didn't send the beagle into the room. Look, it's between you and the beagle. You just got to figure it out because, you leave food down and small furry mammals get the idea that they can come into your room and they will keep coming until they figure out that no, actually things have changed. So I really like that for drawing boundaries, which is I'm not involved in it. With older kids, for example, kids who young adults that I'm helping transition. We've got one now who's aged out of the foster care system, who's living with us, and I said, you have to. You're not in school right now, which is fine. You have a full-time job. You have to contribute to the family. Now, I don't like to take money from my kids because then I argue over money. But I hand them one of the utility bills and say it's between. Usually, I start with the cable company because if they don't pay it, then I have a backup plan. But it's between you and the cable company. They expect their money, and if they don't get their money, I can help you deal with them, but you know what? There's going to be late fees. There's going to be reconnection fees. It's just the way it works. And I'm not involved in the argument. I can help you figure it out, and I can commiserate with you with how greedy they are, but I'm not fixing it for you. And so there's lots of ways of finding that balance. If you don't, a lot of times what we do is we bail the kids out and then we lecture them, and lectures don't work, and bailing them out just teaches them that somebody will bail them out. So
I always say lectures are really an exercise of us trying to make ourselves feel better because I'm proving a point, even though nobody's listening to me anymore.
And I'm venting, so I mean, it has some value for me.
But doing it, but the only value it has for the kid is it trains them to say, what are the least amount of words I can say to get out of this interaction? I'll just kind of wait, and hey, it's your hobby to lecture me, so I'll let you have your hobby, and then I'll get out of here. It's an interesting. Yes. I think one of the keys you just mentioned. One of them is if they're coming up with solutions. I like how you mentioned. I, as their parent or foster parent or step parent or co-parent, whoever I am, like I am one of those resources if they ask me, right? If it's it's gotten, I can't even remember who did it, but I saw this YouTube video making this point once where the guy was talking about, he gave his son the reins to take care of the yard and it was going terribly and it wasn't getting done. And he said, there's that parent party that wants to take over and yell, right, and then do it and then yell. As you put it, we're going to have it both ways. You didn't do the thing, there's the consequence, and I'm going to be mad at you. But then he waited until they had some check-in on it and said, how's it going? And the kid's like, it's so hard. And he said, once again, there's that controlling side of me that wanted to say, how could it be hard? You haven't done anything. But on the other hand, right, there's the side of saying, okay, what are we going to do then? And the kid, part of it was like, could you help me learn how to do this better? I think I forgot what you showed me or something like that.
Right.
Absolutely. Right. Can you I'll even help you weed if you ask me, right? If that's part of the solution, right?
Exactly. We walk alongside them to find the solution, but we don't give it to them and we don't do it for them. And there is a very nurturing aspect to letting them figure things out for themselves that we have to keep in there. We can't just say, I'm done with you, hope you get it worked out. We have to be nurturing and encouraging and walk alongside them and be very happy when they succeed doing the most elementary things that they could have done in half the time if they had just listened to us. We leave all of that out.
Well, exactly, because everybody knows I told you so, and shame makes us better at stuff, right?
Of course.
But we wouldn't appreciate that from our boss, and certainly not from our partner, and as adults, right? And that's an important key I think you hit right there, the nurturing piece, because that's the difference between hey, you forgot to do that trash and put it in your room. And,
Right.
the trash bag's sitting there. That's right. I forgot to take it out yesterday and mom brought it here to remind me. And I'll tell you, that's just our thing. That's what we do. That nurturing
Right.
piece is the difference, right? To say like,
Right.
oh, you got to
Right.
finish this. Here you go. And to me, I think that ego enters into that. And then I think, a bit to where it's like, well, how do I feel better about the fact they didn't listen to me the first time? And that's not the
Right.
goal.
Right. I had one of my stepkids who, wonderful child. We bonded early on. He had no filter when he was younger, which fortunately for him, he's developed one since then. But my life is much more boring now. But when I would ask him things, and I'd just get whatever he was thinking at the moment. So I asked him one day. I said, "When do the trash? They picked up the trash 2 days ago. The trash can's still sitting out at the street. When are you going to bring it back in?" And he said, I I guess when I get tired of your nagging me about it." He wasn't being obnoxious. He was just analyzing and answering the question.
Which,
And-
if you're not taking it personal, you're not over personalizing it,
right,
you can actually play in that space and be, well, how many more? Okay,
right.
sounds good. How many more times do you think?
That's
Like
right.
3 to
That's right.
5? Is that it? Or I'm just wanting to know
What?
for me.
That's right. What number do I have to hit here? Is there something else
Or
I
even
can
to laugh
do?
in the moment with,
Right,
right?
right.
Because that could be
Although
severely annoying at the same time if we let ourselves
it,
get emotional.
right, if you did, and if you understand where the kid's coming from, he didn't even realize he was making a joke. He was simply answering the question. Very left brain um, kind of thing. And another one of my kids who was also left brain said something about his girlfriend got mad at him because she was going on and on about I'm just not good at anything, and of course she was wanting some reassurance, and he just said, "Well, then you need to get good at something."
Right?
That's right. Obviously, that's the
You have.
solution.
Right. I think, the nurturing component is so powerful because when we haven't known the kid, and you point out something really good, which is there's a lot of issues with our own biological children. We
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
notice them, though, because we've known each other a longer time. And I
right.
think having to earn the child's respect and let them know that you care. I
It's
remember
hard.
it can
Yeah.
be really hard. I remember that I'm flipping back in my mind to that training that we had when I did work in residential care and I was in a management position. I realized that there was a flaw in my training. I would usually identify a couple people and say, watch what they do and do what they do. And one in particular was my friend and coworker, Brian, and that's his real name. He's not a client, everybody. I don't have to protect him. Anyway, so I would say, hey, when Brian comes on shift, watch him, kind of follow him around, shadow him, and you're going to learn some really good, because he has a really good rapport with the kids. They generally respect him most of the time, and he knows what to do when they don't. And so, and Brian was really he would come in and look around for an opportunity to say, okay, what time is it? What are they supposed to be doing? Is there anybody breaking a rule? He wanted to right away let them know I'm here, right? And say like, hey, you're supposed to be doing this. Get up, go take out the trash, for example. Or, hey, we're doing chores now. Why are you sitting there? And then they'd go like, oh, Brian's here. All right, we got to get on task. And the problem is that when people would shadow Brian, they would see that and they'd say, awesome, I'm going to do that. And then they wouldn't notice that he made a note in his mind of saying, let's see, I busted on Jimmy when I came in. Sometime tonight before bedtime, I need to connect with Jimmy and say, so how was school today? What are you doing? Hey, I really
That's
appreciate
right.
you took out the trash when I asked you to. And hey,
Oh,
let's laugh and joke a little bit. And he would keep
right.
a little
Exactly.
tally in his mind to balance. And people didn't notice the second part. They just noticed the tough, badass part of it.
Right. Or later catching Jimmy doing something right
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
pointing that out. And a lot of times we do forget to catch our kids succeeding and find times and ways to tell them that. And that is a very important part of nurturing kids. It's just something that we have to be very intentional about it.
What role do you think it plays to bring like the fun side of a relationship in with kids, because I think there's another balance there. There's all these tricky balances we're mentioning. Am I the one who comes in and is like, hey, let's be fun and you're gonna like me,
Yeah.
or am I the kind that's just like, I didn't remember that fun existed or something? Once again, there's that balance there. I wondered your thoughts about that, because I'm a big fan of like fun and play and game way
Oh
of
yeah.
teaching and stuff. Anyway, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it is very important, and it's very important that we do both, because I discovered, for example, in many ways, being a parent, a married parent, of a foster parent and step parent, was more difficult than being a single parent, because when I was a single parent, I didn't, I had to find other people for that extra pair of hands, but I didn't have to consult with anyone. I didn't have to agree with anyone. And then suddenly I became a step parent. I was married to a man who I discovered this wonderful, reasonable, incredibly generous, sensitive man that I'd married didn't agree with me all the time. I didn't understand that, because obviously I knew
Right.
what I was doing. Um, and I have seen a lot of, now. Fortunately, he and I were enough alike that we were able to work together. But a lot of my friends and folks that I work with and see coming into step parent situations or foster parent situations, but it is so very easy for one of them to be the fun parent and one of them to be the structured parent. And particularly if you got a kid that you don't have full custody of, you really want the days with you to be really good days. But both of you have to balance that structure with being the fun parent and or being a fun person and doing fun stuff. It really is not good for the relationship to always be the Disneyland dad. Um, but neither is it good for the relationship to always be this is the weekend, you have to do homework and do structure, and we got to get your chores done. I know you don't do chores at your regular house, but we do chores here. That you really do have to adapt and adjust and have in each individual relationship, you have to have both of those.
Mhm. That balance of having a partner who is the biological, as far as getting into the parenting role of some of those things, what do you feel like is or are there some maybe multiple keys to managing that part of the relationship? Because I think, especially at first, I see there's an appropriate need for some deferment, and
Oh yeah.
hopefully that changes if you build up a relationship with the kids. But also there's always a respect, right, of trying to have that balance. I'm curious your thoughts about how to do
Well,
that.
I think that the two mantras that I have learned, and I didn't coin these, other people have coined them. One is connection before correction, which means if you're not the biological parent, you concentrate on the relationship. And even if your partner, the biological parent, is doing things all wrong and not providing enough structure and not doing it at all what you think needs to be done, you stay in your lane. That is not your job, and you do not do their job for them. So you work on the connection. Now, you can enforce personal boundaries of respect. And I've always had a rule that if my kids want to use profanity and cuss about other things, we'll discuss about whether it's appropriate. But if they start using profanity against me, then I just withdraw from the conversation. And I don't yell or fuss. I just say, obviously, we need to discuss this later. And that's one of my personal boundaries. And I can enforce that no matter what my partner does or what my husband does. But when it comes to other things that we have to agree on, It's his kids, and I work on the relationship. The second thing is related to that, which is the nacho kids. I can't remember what therapist saw that, but it's the short way of saying they are not your kids. And if they're not my kids, it's not my job. And I just stay in my lane and let him take the lead. I can argue and discuss with him when the kids aren't around, but and even if we've agreed on something and then he caves and leaves me looking foolish, oh well, then next time I just tell him you'll have to talk to your dad.
So, but that becomes a communication issue amongst partners,
yes,
not me having to jump in and say, no, you made your dad cave. I'm going to ruin your life now, kid.
Right.
And I say that because people might think that's hyperbolic, but I've run into many, like when I worked with a lot of children in situations of just in therapy, there were a lot of times where it was like, man, I should be doing therapy with your step parent, unfortunately, because there's that.
Yes, it is. And I'm a big fan of counseling, family counseling, and you have to have someone that everyone respects. Because otherwise you just get the one partner saying, well, the counselor's siding with you, so why do I have to pay attention to what the counselor says? And so there was one point my husband and I were having some serious disagreements, and I tracked down a former counselor that actually was a former priest of ours who was also a licensed counselor, that I knew he respected and would listen to. And we drove 3 hours for a session so that I could find someone that we both would pay attention to and listen to. And we didn't have to do that many times. It worked beautifully, because it wasn't just me and someone who agreed with me yelling at him.
Right. And that's sometimes what people shop for, unfortunately.
Oh, yes.
And then are quick to fire someone who doesn't.
Right. Exactly.
It's really
communication. I had to sit there.
Touches all this.
Exactly. I had to sit there quietly during those sessions with that particular counselor and keep my mouth shut. that was incredibly hard.
And boy, talk about being partnered with someone who works in the field we work in, right? Being here's what I think works. And it's like, and by the way, I'm not just making it up, but once again, we have to run a household with the people who live in the household with us. Right. And I think there's a phrase that keeps popping in my mind about kids as you're talking, which I think when they're not your kids, you have to do it very purposefully, but it's also would help anybody out there who is a parent of any kind to keep this in mind, I think, which is to treat them like people. Like if I'm going out in the world and somebody cusses me out, a coworker or something, I'm not going to like send them to their room because I don't have power over them, and I'm not going to.
Right.
And by the way, what would it accomplish anyway? I'm going to withdraw, like you said. Now, if it's in a professional environment, I might, we got to work it out, or HR or something like that. But all those things that actually tie to the situation, I can't go to my boss and say, hey, they cussed at me, this coworker 3 years ago, and haven't got it over it. I need you to fire them. They're going to say, have they done anything lately? Have they done anything since they were corrected and almost fired or whatever? I don't know. You should probably fire
exactly.
Someone. If someone's cussing out colleagues, you should probably, think about firing them. Anyway.
On a regular basis, right. Yeah,
especially on a regular basis. So, you and I have been in similar workplaces where sometimes it gets heated when you're dealing with high stress situations. That's funny. But to say that is, and what am I teaching a child? That if you treat someone like that, they don't want to talk to you. That's a relationship life skill. Whereas if I say, go to your room because I'm more powerful than you. And I'll just say out there, by the way, this is almost metaphorical. There are certainly times the kids, hey, you need to withdraw to this place because you're throwing things or whatever. I mean, I'm not talking about that.
Right.
I'm talking about what happens more often. And it's like, if all I do, and see, this is where on here, anyone who's listened knows I'm not really a fan of grounding as people usually do it. It's like, you're grounded. That means you can't watch TV, and I'm done. And it's like, did you do anything really? I mean, yeah, okay, it cost me, but if it's not logically tied to the TV and I'm not doing any other
Yes.
work to say I just took it away because you love it, and I'm people who are more powerful get to hurt people. That's what I'm running the risk of teaching, right?
Right. It does need to be logically connected. I mean, there's a couple of stories that I have of when they worked. I don't remember the times things didn't work, by the way. I only remember the times when I was
You
successful.
can't sell a book on no.
That's right. That's
Just
right.
kidding.
But
Sorry.
that's right. But one of my grandkids, I was getting ready for school one day, was rude to me, and I said, "Oh, that's not." She was 6 or 7, and I said that's not good to be rude to people. You need to apologize. She said, "I don't feel like it." And I said, "Well, okay, we'll have this discussion again later." And I got her off to school, and she came home and was in a much better mood and asked me for a favor. And I said, "Oh no, remember this morning when you were rude to me? I don't do favors for people who are rude to me." And so we need to resolve that first. Um, and we talked it through, but it was the logical connection to she had been rude to me, and when you're rude to people, they don't like you.
It's not that I won't help
Um,
you, but this has to happen first.
this has to happen first. So
Right.
yeah. Another time, one of my kids had lied to me about doing his homework, and I discovered he had not really done his homework and turned it in. And I said, "Oh, we got trust issues now." It's like, what does that mean? I said, well, we have trust issues. We're just going to have to work through these. And so later that night, when I went down. I said, well, it's time for you to go to bed. Wait, it's 2 hours before my bedtime. Well, I know, honey, but I'm ready to go upstairs to my room, and I don't want to have to come back down. And I can't trust you these days. So you have to go to bed now when I can see you go to bed. And the next day, he wanted to go down and visit a friend. Well, I'm sorry. Remember, we have trust issues. If I could trust you, then yes, you could go. But since I can't trust you, then no, you can't. And he was locked down for 2 days or 3 days before he finally came to me and said, "Okay, when do I get off being grounded?" I said, "No, you're not grounded. We have trust issues, and you have to. All right. When will we no longer have trust issues?" Well, the way trust works is you have to build it back up, once you've lost it. So let's start with some small things and see if you can build it back up, and then we'll get you back to where you were. But this is how trust works. And so I don't know, a couple of years later, I said something about, are we going to have trust issues again? He said, "Oh, no. No, no, no. You scarred my soul with that last time. We are not ever doing that again."
How,
and but it was the logical connection and having to work through, look, this is not my rules. This is just how trust works.
how do you bring that in when you're working with, uh, or what tweaks or things you have to watch for when you're working with kids, maybe particularly in foster care, who've been through those traumas and abuses and have never learned those skills? And where does that come into where you have to maybe take them by the hand a little more or a little less? Is that just by
Yeah,
feel?
you have to be more nurturing. The consequences have to be less severe. With a lot of times with kids with trauma, you have to understand that their emotional development has been slowed down, and they're usually 2 to 3 years behind their chronological age. So you have to think of, 13-year-old, you have to understand is probably on the developmental level, at least emotionally, of a preteen. So you have to gauge your consequences in your structure, not for teenagers, but for their emotional age. So, if I had a more traumatized kid on the trust issues, I would have laid it out much more clearly and made it much shorter. I wouldn't have left them to figure out quite so much. But with the kid that I was working with, who was very bright and was figuring it out, I knew I could do that, but with another kid, I would have done, again, like I said, much less. It would have been much shorter. I would have
You
been
might
much
have
more
had
clear.
you might have had to be the one to initiate, here's how you build trust, or else it would be
Exactly.
like weeks
Right.
later and our
Exactly.
relationship's trash.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
finding that
and
balance, right?
finding that, and also understanding, the younger the kid, the less time you can do it, because if well, we had one of our kids who, in middle school, messed with it didn't have good grades, and so our rule was, obviously you're spending too much time on your electronics, so no more electronics until the next grading period. Well, for seventh or eighth grader, they can look forward 9 weeks. But but again, for someone who's at a 6, 7, 8 year old, level, that 9 weeks is forever.
Yeah.
So you can only do it a week at a time, because if you tell them they're locked down, or out of electronics because their grades are, and it was no electronics during the week, by the way, they could have their weekends back. So if you've always got to leave them something left to lose. And so if you have a younger kid and they think, I'm never going to get this back ever, and I could never earn it back, then what have they got to lose?
Right.
They might as well quit trying.
If that's our dynamic, and I think this especially goes with certain personality types, where if I'm a young person who is more control oriented, perhaps because I've lost control, I have a feeling of control in my
Right.
life, then I'm going to be like, no, all right, screw you, take away. Oh, you took away that? Fine, here, take these too. I'll just sit in a room
Exactly.
with nothing but a chair and a bed, and I'll just sit there and I'm just going to stare at the wall, and I'm going to get used to that. Then it's like, oh, we need to alter this approach. I've also found that knowing them and treating them like a person, um, you get to know which things are rewards that, if they're taken away or restricted, will motivate, and which
Right.
things are sort of prescriptive. Like if I have a certain kid, yeah, you can't go out and hang out this weekend because you haven't done the work on your grades or whatever. But then another kid might be like, if I give you no social interaction, your life's over and you're going to get hopeless. And I
Oh,
actually need,
yes.
you know what? I know you haven't worked on your grades yet, but you can go hang out for this long because I know it's good for you. Or you can go to karate class tonight or whatever it is, because, and I was always a big fan of things that are healthy. Even if they like them, we really should question if we take that away. If it's a healthy thing, like, oh, you can't. I've
Oh,
known
well,
people that are like,
right.
you can't go to football practice, and the kid loves football because they love football. That'll get them. And you have to be careful, because there is a kid who will go, all right, fine, I couldn't go tonight, and I will never let that happen again. And there's the kid that will be like, I bet they benefit so much from it emotionally that they're just going to get worse. So,
Right. And not only that, but if they don't go to full football practice, then the coach is like, I'm sorry, I
then
have a
we're into
team
other
of people
problems, right?
here, and
Yeah.
so
And we go to our things when we're not on top of
yes.
everything in our lives. I still got to get that done, but people are waiting for me, and this is healthy for me, so I should go. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So it does have to be, it has to be tailored. It has to be logically connected, and and again, I wouldn't go for extracurricular activities that are healthy for them unless you're going to do it in really small doses. Um, because it's, I think, in what you're talking about, if you've got a kid who's emotionally tied into to football or a particular sport a an outlet for them, then that goes under what I call the safety boundaries of logical connections. You don't want any consequences that are physically or emotionally unsafe for them. So I'm old enough to remember when scared straight was a thing. You just took kids who were at risk of being juvenile delinquents, and they spent a day in an adult jail.
Sometimes with
Um,
inmates yelling in their faces.
yes, exactly. And the idea was it would scare them into being straight. Well, that is not emotionally safe
Mm.
or emotionally healthy. And so it may be that restricting a kid from football practice is not emotionally safe for them. And so we have to go for something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it motivated by what's going to help and
Right.
watching to see and getting to know them to see what works instead of what we think should work and
Right.
and what makes us feel better. So
Yes.
awesome.
What lets me vent?
Yes, exactly. You're gonna learn that you made me mad.
Right.
Uh yeah, so this is very, I think, not only is this useful tips and techniques you're talking about, but it's a discussion that sometimes we don't look around and find a ton of resources. Other, at least I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, there are some resources out there for foster trainings and stuff like that, but unfortunately they often don't have things like this, what we're talking about.
Right.
They're often more
Right.
just very structurally practical instead of communication and relationship practical. Yeah.
Right. And I think you can find those. There are some good networking groups, some good support groups for foster parents. There's some of the states have really good, strong foster parent associations. That there are some good. I mean, there's some really bad online groups, but there also are some good groups that will you go in and say, what do I do now with this kid? And they can give you tips and tricks that they've learned. There's also a new thing called that I didn't have when I was foster parent, called trust-based relational intervention, TBRI, that has some really good practical things for parents out there.
That's interesting.
So yeah, I think TBRI it's actually it's part of that connection before correction stuff. So it is you have to make kids feel psychologically safe before they're going to listen to you about anything. Mm-hmm. Now that doesn't mean that you don't have structure, because you can't say, oh gosh, I have to make this 4-year-old feel psychologically safe before I can explain to them why they can't play in the middle of the road. No, you have to keep them physically safe. But once you understand that psychological safety has to be the foundation of it, then that sort of it informs all of your other decisions. Like, do I restrict them from football or do I restrict them from something else, kind of thing.
And if I have to grab them out of the street, I can still then talk to them afterwards in a way that is psychologically safe, rather than just being like done. Once again, I think that's one that I look out for a lot in parenting, is when I think like, okay, well, I did a thing, and it's like, did I yet? Did I really do a thing, or did I just do the thing without telling why I'm doing the thing, or listening to them and that? So,
right,
yeah. So being having that. I really love that, as you say, the connection and the relationship, because ultimately, especially as they get older, that really is all we have. You see,
yes.
Especially when there's an age before 18 that we can't do a whole lot if they realize, oh, we don't have a relationship and I don't really want to listen to you and I don't mind sitting at home for the weekend. What am I going to do to help teach and motivate then? Well, relationship, so.
Right.
The book, again, is Raising Other People's Children. That's the title. And I want to get into where people can find that and to follow your work. First, I have my magic question for everyone that comes on, which I like to ask people. We love to highlight charities and nonprofits that people can feel good about looking into. And you said you actually, you and your co-author have a work with a nonprofit directly.
Yes. I Raising Other People's Children was my first book. My second book was with my co-author, called Protecting Other People's Children. It was about, for youth organizations, put together child protection policies. But Tom and I are both on the board of a group called Connections Homes, which works with it's connectionshomes.org, and it connects mentors with youth who have aged out of the foster system. And actually, that's what my husband and I are doing now. We're in the stage of life where it's hard to have someone living with us who's not independent because of our travel schedule and various things. So we are mentoring a kid who aged out of the foster system with no family connections. And so it's a wonderful group.
I know that's a whole nother topic, but that is, for people who don't
Yes.
know, that's a huge gap in treatment.
Oh, it is.
And, it's like, great, you made it to 18, we're done with you. And by the system, right? There's just not a lot of, there are programs, but there's not many of them. And they also many of them require a certain assumption of independence that 18-year-old child may not have,
Right.
And I say 18-year-olds, right. We're both old enough that 18-year-olds are children for sure.
Right. Yes.
Well, where do people find you and follow your work? And is there a best way or place for them to get your book?
There is. There's several places on LinkedIn and all of that, but the one-stop shop is called YSOacademy.com. That stands for Youth Serving Organization, YSO. So YSOacademy.com is where we sell the books, and we have online courses for both foster and step parents, and then youth organizations about working with kids. We're gradually getting CEU credits from various places. So check it out and let us know if you want us to submit the courses for any of your states or programs for approval. And we have a blog there that's where I do most of my writing on these subjects is YSOacademy.com, and the blog is in the header.
Okay. YSOacademy.com. Great. And I did get a chance when they had sent me some of your details and things to check it out. It's very well organized too, which is, I'm very nitpicky about websites. It's like I can find stuff, and I like that, by the way. So I happened to see
Thank you.
Just throw that out there. A quick plug for all the listeners out there. As you know, each month we also highlight a local charity. And this actually, we're doubling up for these months. The next, for October and November, our charity of highlight is the Because Organization of Philadelphia. And the Because Organization, we've had their organizers, their founder, have come on before. They work with individuals who, speaking of transition, are people who have been through the experience of being trafficked and are no longer in that situation. And so somewhere in between getting out of that situation and feeling safe and functional in society, you need some help. And that's what they do. So we're over the month of October and November, they're actually having their annual fundraiser, which is a walkathon. You can walk, you can run, but one of the cool things is you can do it anywhere where you are. It's not a big local event, it's a virtual event, and you can log what you're doing there. You can get details about that at becauseorganization.org. And as always, anybody who decides to support the Broken Brain and help us out with the podcast, if you go to patreon.com/brokenbrain, 50% of your donation will always go, each month, will go to the charitable foundation that was being highlighted when you joined. So in this case, that would be the Because Organization, and that will go on as long as anybody is a Patreon member, as well as whatever bonus materials we can toss your way too. So, Debbie, I'm very, very grateful. Thank you for writing the books and doing the work you're doing, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for that very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Court and Parts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court and Parts shows, visit courtandarts.com.